The dust from the general store's floorboards rose in small clouds as Clara Whitmore set down her basket. Watching the storekeeper's wife lean across the counter with that particular expression of pity mixed with disdain that had become painfully familiar over the past 18 months. "Now, Clara, you know I think the world of you, but Thomas is my cousin. And well, a widow with 3 boys is just too much responsibility for any man to take on," Mrs. Henderson said, her voice dropping to a whisper that still carried across the entire store. "He's looking for a fresh start, not a ready-made family with all those mouths to feed." Clara felt the familiar burn of rejection spreading through her chest, but she kept her chin high and her voice steady. "I understand completely, Mrs. Henderson. Please tell Thomas I wish him well in finding what he's looking for." She picked up her basket of supplies and turned toward the door, her worn boots clicking against the wooden floor with as much dignity as she could muster. This was the 3rd rejection in 6 months, and each one cut deeper than the last, not because she had harbored any particular affection for the men in question, but because it reinforced what she already knew. In Redemption, Wyoming, in the year 1882, a 24-year-old widow with 3 young sons was about as desirable as a 3-legged horse. The September sun blazed overhead as Clara stepped onto the boardwalk, squinting against the brightness. Her sons would be waiting at the schoolhouse, and she needed to collect them before heading back to the small ranch that her late husband Robert had left her. The property was modest, barely 20 acres with a cabin that leaked when it rained and a barn that sagged to one side, but it was hers, and she would do everything in her power to keep it that way, even if it meant working herself to the bone. She was so lost in her thoughts that she nearly collided with a man coming out of the saloon. He caught her elbow to steady her, and she looked up into a pair of startlingly blue eyes set in a sun-weathered face. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and a several days' growth of beard that somehow made him look rugged rather than unkempt. "My apologies, ma'am," he said, his voice a deep rumble with a slight Texas drawl. "I should have been watching where I was going." "No, it was my fault entirely," Clara replied, stepping back and smoothing her faded calico dress. "I was not paying attention." He tipped his hat, revealing more of his face, and Clara noticed the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Are you all right? You look a bit troubled, if you do not mind my saying so." "I am fine, thank you," Clara said automatically, but something about his genuine concern made her pause. "It has just been one of those days." "Those seem to come around more often than we would like," he said with an understanding nod. "I am Cole Harrison. I just rode into town yesterday looking for work. I am hoping to find something steady around these parts." "Clara Whitmore," she replied, adjusting her basket on her arm. "If you are looking for ranch work, you might try the Patterson spread about 10 miles north. They are always looking for good hands." "I appreciate the suggestion, Mrs. Whitmore," Cole said, noticing her wedding ring, which she still wore out of habit and perhaps a small measure of protection. "Though I was hoping to find something a bit closer to town. I'm getting a little old for the wandering life, to be honest. I am 31 and figure it is about time I put down some roots." Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted from down the street. She turned to see her 3 sons racing toward her, their teacher Miss Abigail hurrying behind them with an exasperated expression. 8-year-old Samuel reached her first, his shirt torn at the shoulder, followed by 6-year-old Daniel with a bleeding lip, and 4-year-old William bringing up the rear, his face streaked with tears. "Mama, we are sorry," Samuel burst out before she could even ask. "Billy Crawford said we did not have a real family anymore since Pa died, and Daniel punched him, and then I got into it, and William started crying, and Miss Abigail had to separate everyone." Clara knelt down, her basket forgotten, and began checking each boy for serious injuries. "Daniel, let me see that lip. Samuel, how did you tear your shirt? William, sweetheart, come here." "Mrs. Whitmore, I am so sorry," Miss Abigail said, arriving breathless. "The Crawford boy has been taunting them for weeks. I have spoken to his parents, but nothing seems to help." Today things just got out of hand. It is all right, Miss Abigail, Clara said, though her heart ached for her sons. Boys, we do not solve our problems with our fists. Do you understand? But Mama, he said we were not a proper family, Daniel protested, his brown eyes so like his father's filling with tears. He said you were going to lose the ranch because you cannot run it without a man and we would all end up in the poorhouse. The words hit Clara like a physical blow, partly because they echoed her own deepest fears. She pulled all three boys close, trying to shield them from the curious stares of passers-by. We are a family and we are going to be just fine. Now we need to get home and take care of these scrapes. Ma'am, if you will pardon the intrusion, Cole's voice came from above her, and Clara had nearly forgotten he was there. I could not help but overhear. If you need help with your ranch, I am looking for work. I have been working cattle and horses since I was 12 years old. I know my way around a property. Clara stood slowly, her sons pressing close against her skirts. Mr. Harrison, I appreciate the offer, but I cannot afford to hire help right now. We are barely scraping by as it is. How about this? Cole said, crouching down so he was at eye level with the boys. I need a place to stay, and it sounds like you could use an extra pair of hands. What if I work for room and board until you can afford to pay me? That way everybody wins. I get a roof over my head, and you get help with the heavy work around your place. Samuel studied Cole with the serious expression of a child who had been forced to grow up too quickly. Can you fix a barn roof? Ours leaks? I can fix just about anything, Cole replied with a gentle smile. And I am pretty good with horses, too. Do you have horses? We have two, William piped up, his tears forgotten. Daisy and Buck. Mama says Buck is getting old and needs special care. Cole looked up at Clara, and she found herself caught in those blue eyes again. There was something honest in his face, something trustworthy that she had not seen in any of the men who had courted her with ulterior motives or rejected her outright. But she had learned to be cautious, to protect herself and her sons from disappointment. Mr. Harrison, that is very generous, but I do not know you. I cannot just invite a stranger to live on my property with my children, Clara said carefully. That is wise of you, Mrs. Whitmore, Cole replied, standing up. How about this? I will stay in town for a few days and we can get to know each other a bit better. You can ask around about me. I am a good worker, and I give you my word I am an honorable man. If after a few days you feel comfortable with the arrangement, the offer stands. Clara hesitated, her practical nature warring with the desperate need for help that she had been too proud to admit. The barn roof was not the only thing falling apart. The fence in the north pasture needed mending, the well pump was acting up, and she had been trying to do it all herself while also caring for 3 active boys. She was exhausted, running on determination and strong coffee, and the weight of it all was beginning to crush her. All right, she heard herself say. Come by the day after tomorrow for supper. The ranch is about 3 miles west of town, a white cabin with a red barn. You cannot miss it. Cole's face broke into a genuine smile that transformed his features from merely handsome to something that made Clara's heart skip in a way she had not felt since Robert had courted her all those years ago. I will be there, Mrs. Whitmore. Thank you for the opportunity. As Clara led her sons toward the wagon at the end of the street, Samuel tugged on her sleeve. Mama, do you think he will really come? I do not know, sweetheart, Clara replied honestly. But if he does, you boys will be on your best behavior. Understood. All 3 boys nodded solemnly, but she could see the spark of hope in their eyes, and it made her chest tighten with a mixture of fear and something else she was not quite ready to name. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. Clara cleaned the cabin from top to bottom, much to her son's bewilderment since she was always particular about keeping things neat. She baked bread, prepared a pot roast with the last of their good beef, and even put on her better dress, the dark blue one with the lace collar that she had not worn since Robert's funeral. She told herself it was simple courtesy, showing respect for a guest, but there was a nervous flutter in her stomach that suggested otherwise. Cole arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, riding a magnificent bay horse and carrying a bouquet of wildflowers that he must have picked along the road. He had cleaned up considerably, his hair neatly combed and his face freshly shaved, revealing a strong jaw and a small scar above his left eyebrow that gave him a roguish quality. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, dismounting and offering her the flowers. "Thank you again for the invitation. Mr. Harrison," Clara replied, taking the flowers and feeling a blush creep up her cheeks. "Please come in. Supper is almost ready." The boys had been watching from the window, and they tumbled out onto the porch as Cole approached. He greeted each one by name, which surprised Clara since she had only mentioned them briefly during their first encounter. He must have been paying closer attention than she realized. "Samuel, I heard you are the man of the house now," Cole said seriously. "That is a big responsibility." Samuel straightened his shoulders. "Yes, sir, I help Mama with the chores and I watch my brothers." "That is good. A family needs everyone to pitch in," Cole said, then turned to Daniel. "How is that lip healing up?" Daniel touched his mouth gingerly. "It is okay, still hurts a little." "Fighting for your family's honor, I respect that," Cole said. "But your mama is right. There are better ways to handle bullies. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away." "But that makes you look weak," Daniel protested. "Not if you are confident in who you are and where you come from," Cole replied. "Real strength is not about fists, it is about character." William, who had been hanging back shyly, suddenly spoke up. "Do you have a family, Mr. Harrison?" The question seemed to catch Cole off guard, and Clara saw a flicker of sadness pass across his face before he answered. "No, son, I do not. My parents passed when I was young and I have been on my own for a long time, but I always wanted a big family. That has been my dream." "You could be part of our family," William said with the innocent directness of a 4-year-old. "We have room." "William," Clara said quickly, mortified, "that is not appropriate." But Cole just laughed, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to fill the evening air. "That is the best offer I have had in a long time, William. Thank you." Supper was a revelation. Clara had expected awkwardness, stilted conversation, and the usual discomfort that came from entertaining a stranger. Instead, Cole fit into their little household as if he had always been there. He complimented her cooking with genuine appreciation, told stories about his travels that had the boys hanging on every word, and helped clear the table without being asked. When Samuel accidentally knocked over his milk, Cole simply mopped it up with his napkin and told a story about the time he had spilled an entire pot of coffee on his trail boss, diffusing what might have been a tense moment with humor. After the boys were sent to bed, Clara and Cole sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the Wyoming prairie in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The evening was cool, with a slight breeze carrying the scent of sage and grass. "Your boys are wonderful," Cole said after a long, comfortable silence. "You have done an amazing job with them." "They are good boys," Clara replied, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders. "They have had to grow up faster than they should have." "Robert died in a riding accident 18 months ago. A snake spooked his horse and he was thrown. He hit his head on a rock and never woke up. It happened so fast." "I am sorry for your loss," Cole said quietly. "That must have been incredibly hard." "It was," Clara admitted, surprised at how easy it was to talk to him. "But what has been harder in some ways is what came after. This town has made it very clear that a widow with 3 children is not an appealing prospect. I have been courted by men who wanted the ranch, not the family. And I have been rejected by men who made it clear that my sons were a burden they had no interest in carrying." Cole was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "I think those men are fools. Your boys are not a burden, they are a blessing. And any man who cannot see that does not deserve you." Clara turned to look at him, startled by the intensity in his voice. "You say that now, but you do not know what it is like. 3 boys are loud, expensive, and exhausting. They need clothes and food and attention. They get sick, they fight, they make mistakes. It is not an easy life. I never wanted an easy life, Cole said, meeting her gaze. I wanted a meaningful one. I have spent the last 15 years drifting from ranch to ranch, town to town, always moving, never settling. I have saved every penny I could, looking for the right place to finally build something lasting. When I saw you in town the other day, when I heard what that woman said to you in the store, and then saw you with your boys, fighting so hard to protect them and provide for them, I knew I had found something special. Mr. Harrison, Clara began, but he held up his hand. Please call me Cole. And I am not asking for anything right now except a chance to prove myself. Let me help you with the ranch. Let me show you that not all men run from responsibility. Some of us have been searching for it our whole lives. Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them back. Why would you want this? You could go anywhere, start fresh without the complications. Because I am tired of being alone, Cole said simply. Because when William said I could be part of your family, it was the first time in years that I felt like I might actually belong somewhere. Because your boys need a man who will show them how to be good men. And you need someone who will stand beside you, not in front of you or behind you, but beside you as an equal partner. And because, he paused, a slight color rising in his cheeks, I have not been able to stop thinking about you since we met. You are strong, brave, and beautiful, and I would be honored to get to know you better. The honesty in his words took Clara's breath away. She had been courted before, both before and after Robert's death, but no one had ever spoken to her like this, with such openness and vulnerability. I am scared, she whispered. I am scared to hope again. I am scared to let my boys hope again. What if this does not work out? What if you change your mind once you see how hard it really is? Cole reached over and gently took her hand. His palm was calloused from years of hard work, but his touch was gentle. I cannot promise I will never make mistakes, but I can promise I will not walk away when things get difficult. I know what I am signing up for, Clara, and I am all in if you will give me a chance. Clara looked down at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his skin against hers. It had been so long since anyone had touched her with tenderness, so long since she had felt anything other than exhaustion and worry. All right, she said softly. You can stay in the small room off the barn. We will start with the arrangement you suggested, room and board in exchange for work. We will take things slow and see how it goes. Cole's face lit up with a smile that made him look years younger. Thank you, Clara. You will not regret this. The next morning, Clara woke to the sound of hammering. She rushed to the window and saw Cole already up on the barn roof, his shirt off in the early morning heat, working on the damaged shingles. The boys were awake as well, gathered below watching him with fascination. Can we help? Samuel called up. You bet, Cole called back. I need someone to hand me nails. Think you can do that? Samuel scrambled up the ladder with the confidence of youth, and soon he and Cole were working together, the older man showing the boy how to properly secure the shingles. Daniel and William took on the job of organizing the tools below, their earlier grief and anger replaced with purpose and excitement. Clara stood at the window, watching this scene unfold, and felt something in her chest that had been tight and closed for 18 months begin to soften. She was not foolish enough to think that one good morning meant everything would be perfect, but it was a start, and after so many months of struggling alone, a start felt like everything. Over the next few weeks, Cole proved himself to be everything he had claimed and more. He fixed the barn roof, mended the fences, repaired the well pump, and even built a new chicken coop that was twice the size of the old one. He worked from dawn until dusk, never complaining, always finding small ways to make their lives easier. He carved wooden animals for William, taught Daniel how to whittle, and spent hours with Samuel, showing him how to handle the horses and mend tack. But it was the small, unexpected moments that truly won Clara's heart. The way Cole always made sure there was fresh water in the house before she needed to ask. The way he sat with William during a thunderstorm when the boy was frightened, telling him stories until he fell asleep. The way he listened when Daniel talked about missing his father, not trying to replace Robert but honoring his memory. The way he consulted with Samuel on ranch decisions, treating the boys' opinions with respect, and then there were the moments between Clara and Cole. The conversations that stretched long into the evening after the boys were asleep. The way he looked at her across the dinner table, his eyes full of admiration and something deeper that made her heart race. The accidental touches that lingered a second longer than necessary. The morning she found wildflowers on the porch with no note, but she knew they were from him. One evening, about 6 weeks after Cole had arrived, Clara was washing dishes when he came in from the barn. "Samuel did a great job with Buck today," he said. "That boy has a real talent with horses." "He loves them," Clara replied, scrubbing a pot. "His father used to take him riding every Sunday. It is one of his favorite memories." Cole picked up a dish towel and began drying, something he had started doing despite her protests that it was not necessary. "Clara, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," she said, curious about the serious tone in his voice. "Do you think you will ever be ready to marry again? Not me necessarily," he added quickly. "Just in general. Or did you lose that dream when Robert died?" Clara set down the pot and turned to face him, wiping her hands on her apron. "I loved Robert," she said honestly. "He was a good man and a good father, but I would be lying if I said our marriage was some grand romance. We were practical, suited to each other, and we built a life together. It was enough and I was content. When he died, I grieved him, but I also grieved the security he provided. I grieved not being alone." She paused, gathering her courage. "But over these past weeks, I have come to realize that there are different kinds of love. And maybe, just maybe, I am not too old or too complicated to find something deeper than contentment." Cole set down the dish towel and took a step closer to her. "And what if I told you that I think I am falling in love with you? Not despite your boys, but partly because of them, because they are a part of you and they are wonderful. What if I told you that I lie awake at night in that room off the barn, wishing I was in the house, not as a hired hand but as your husband? What if I told you that I want to adopt your boys, give them my name and raise them as my own? What would you say to that?" Clara felt her breath catch in her throat. "I would say that I am terrified because I feel the same way. I would say that I look for you first thing every morning and that your smile makes me feel things I have never felt before. I would say that my boys already love you and I am halfway there myself. But I would also say that I am scared of moving too fast, of making a mistake that could hurt all of us. Then we will move at whatever pace you need," Cole said, reaching up to gently cup her cheek. "I am not going anywhere, Clara. I have finally found my home and I am not about to let it go." He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but Clara found herself rising on her toes to meet him. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question and an answer all at once. When they pulled apart, both were breathless. "Mama is kissing Cole." William's voice rang out from the hallway, and they sprang apart to find all three boys peering around the doorway with wide eyes and huge grins. "Boys, what are you doing out of bed?" Clara asked, trying to sound stern but unable to stop her own smile. "We heard talking," Samuel said, not looking the least bit sorry. "Does this mean Cole is going to be our new father?" Cole looked at Clara and she nodded slightly, giving him permission to answer. He crouched down so he was at the boy's level. "Well, that depends." "How would you fellows feel about that? I know I could never replace your father and I would never try. But I would be honored to be your stepfather to help raise you and be there for you. What do you think?" "Yes." William shouted, launching himself at Cole with such force that the man nearly toppled over. "I think it would be good," Daniel said more cautiously, "but you have to promise not to leave like Papa did." "Daniel, I promise you I am not going anywhere," Cole said solemnly. "I will be here for birthdays and Christmases and every day in between. I will teach you to ride and rope and everything else you want to learn, and when you are older and have families of your own, I will still be here because that is what fathers do. They stay." Samuel, the most reserved of the three, studied Cole with those serious eyes. Will you teach me to be a good man like my papa was? I will do my best, Cole replied, his voice thick with emotion. And we will figure it out together, all right. Samuel nodded and then, to Clara's surprise, stepped forward and hugged Cole tightly. Then I think you should marry Mama. Cole looked up at Clara over the boys' heads, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Well, I had planned to do this a bit more formally, but I suppose there is no time like the present. He stood up, keeping one hand on William's shoulder, and faced Clara. Clara Whitmore, you have already given me more than I ever dreamed of having, but I am a greedy man and I want more. I want every morning and every evening. I want to sit beside you in church on Sundays and work beside you in the fields. I want to raise these fine boys into men their father would be proud of. I want to give you more children if you are willing, to fill this house with laughter and love. And most of all, I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you every single day that you made the right choice in taking a chance on a drifter cowboy who walked into your life one dusty afternoon. Will you marry me? Clara felt tears streaming down her face, but for once they were tears of joy rather than sorrow or frustration. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Cole Harrison, I will marry you. The boys erupted in cheers, and suddenly they were all hugging and laughing, a tangle of arms and joy in the middle of the kitchen. It was messy and chaotic and absolutely perfect. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Redemption, with half the town in attendance. Mrs. Henderson from the general store had the grace to look embarrassed when Clara walked down the aisle in a new dress that Cole had insisted on buying her. Thomas, the man who had rejected Clara for being a widow with children, stood in the back looking distinctly uncomfortable as Cole promised to love, honor, and cherish not just Clara, but her boys as well. The reception was held at the ranch, which Cole had transformed over the past weeks. The barn stood straight and proud with a new coat of paint. The fences were mended, the yard was cleared, and flowers bloomed in boxes beneath the windows. It looked like a real home now, a place where a family could thrive. As the sun set on their wedding day, Clara found herself standing on the same porch where Cole had first told her he was falling in love with her. The guests had gone home, the boys were finally asleep in their beds, and she and Cole had a moment alone as husband and wife. "Are you happy?" Cole asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Clara replied, leaning back against his chest. 6 months ago, I was rejected by Thomas Henderson for having 3 sons. Now I have a husband who loves them as much as I do. Life has a funny way of working out. Thomas Henderson is an idiot, Cole said, pressing a kiss to her temple. I always wanted a big family, and you gave me that. Those boys are the best thing that ever happened to me besides you. We come as a package deal, Clara said with a smile. That is exactly how I want it, Cole replied. Although I have to admit, I am looking forward to maybe adding to that package. What do you think about giving the boys a little brother or sister? Clara turned in his arms to face him. I think that sounds wonderful. But Cole, I need you to understand something. Even if we cannot have more children, even if it is just the 5 of us forever, that is enough for me. You are enough. You are more than enough for me too, Cole said softly. But I have a feeling our family is going to keep growing one way or another, and I am going to love every minute of it. He kissed her then, slow and deep, a kiss full of promise and passion and the beginning of their life together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and flushed, Clara took his hand and led him into the house, into the bedroom they now shared, into the future they would build together. The first year of their marriage was not without challenges. There were arguments about discipline and money, and whose turn it was to deal with William's fear of the dark. There were difficult conversations with the boys about their late father and where Cole fit into their lives. There were moments when Clara wondered if she had moved too fast, if Cole would regret taking on so much responsibility. But for every challenge, there were a dozen moments of joy. The day Samuel won first place at the county fair for his horsemanship, beaming with pride as Cole hoisted him onto his shoulders. The afternoon, Daniel brought home a perfect spelling test, and Cole hung it on the wall like it was a masterpiece. The night, William had a nightmare and ran not to Clara's room but to Cole's side of the bed, trusting him completely to chase away the monsters. And there were the quiet moments between Clara and Cole. The way he always poured her coffee first in the morning. The way she mended his shirts with extra care, adding small decorative stitches just because she knew he would notice. The way they worked side by side in the garden, their movements synchronized without words. The way they made love with increasing passion and tenderness, learning each other's bodies and hearts in equal measure. 10 months after their wedding, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She told Cole one evening after supper, placing his hand on her still flat stomach and watching his face transform with wonder. "Are you sure?" he whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "I am sure," Clara replied, laughing at his expression. "You are going to be a father, Cole Harrison." "I am already a father," Cole said, pulling her close. "But I will admit the thought of a baby, a child who is part of both of us, it feels like a miracle." "How do you think the boys will take it?" Clara asked, a hint of worry in her voice. "I think they will be excited," Cole assured her. "But we will talk to them together, make sure they know this does not change how much we love them." They told the boys the next morning at breakfast, and the reactions were everything they could have hoped for. Samuel, now 9 years old and growing more mature every day, grinned broadly and asked if he could help build a cradle. Daniel, 7 and full of energy, wanted to know if the baby would be a boy or girl and if they could teach it to ride horses. William, now 5 and the baby of the family, looked thoughtful for a moment before announcing that he supposed it would be all right to have someone smaller than him around. As Clara's pregnancy progressed, the entire family rallied around her. Cole would not let her lift anything heavy and insisted she rest every afternoon. The boys took on extra chores without complaint and competed to see who could bring her the most comfortable pillow or the coldest glass of water. It was during those months that Clara truly understood what Cole had meant when he said he always wanted a big family. It was not just about numbers. It was about the way they all cared for each other, the way they functioned as a unit. In early spring of 1884, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Robert Cole Harrison, honoring both the father who had started their family and the man who had completed it. The older boys were entranced with their new brother, taking turns holding him with exaggerated gentleness and reporting his every movement to Cole and Clara as if they were witnessing miracles. "He grabbed my finger, Mama," William reported one afternoon, his voice full of awe. "That means he likes you," Clara said with a smile, watching her youngest older son bond with the new baby. "Of course he does," Cole said, coming in from the barn and kissing first Clara, then the baby's forehead. "We are his family." 2 years later, Clara gave birth to twin girls, Eleanor and Grace, much to everyone's surprise and delight. The house was chaotic with 7 people under one roof, but it was the kind of chaos that spoke of love and life. Samuel, now 11, was a tremendous help with the babies, showing a patience and gentleness that made Clara's heart swell. Daniel, 9, entertained them with silly faces and songs. William, 7, appointed himself their protector, warning anyone who came near that these were his sisters and they had better be nice to them. And little Robert, just 2 years old, was fascinated by the babies, insisting on sharing his toys with them even though they were too young to play. Cole thrived in the chaos. He had expanded the ranch considerably, buying the adjacent property and increasing their herd. They were no longer just scraping by, they were prospering, but more importantly, they were happy. The house that had once been falling apart was now sturdy and full, with additions built to accommodate their growing family. The barn where Cole had first stayed in that small room was now filled with horses, including a beautiful mare that Samuel was training himself. On their 5th anniversary, Cole surprised Clara with a trip into town, arranging for Samuel to watch the younger children for an evening. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, a luxury they rarely indulged in, and walked through town arm in arm as the sun set. "Do you remember the first time we met?" Cole asked, steering her toward the spot outside the saloon where they had collided. "I was standing right here and you nearly ran into me." "You caught me," Clara corrected with a smile, "and I thought you were just another cowboy passing through town." "I was," Cole said, "until I met you, then I knew I had found what I had been searching for my whole life." "And what was that?" Clara asked, though she knew the answer. "A home," Cole replied simply. "A family, a purpose. You gave me all of that and more. You gave me Samuel, Daniel, and William. You gave me Robert, Alina, and Grace. You gave me a reason to wake up every morning and a reason to come home every night. You gave me everything." Clara felt tears prick her eyes, but they were happy tears. "You gave me a second chance at love. You showed me that being a widow with 3 sons was not a burden but a gift. You showed my boys what a real man looks like, how he treats his family, how he keeps his promises. You gave us security and stability, but more than that, you gave us joy." Cole pulled her close and kissed her there on the street, not caring who might see. When they pulled apart, Clara was laughing, feeling young and carefree in a way she had never experienced before. "I love you, Clara Harrison," Cole said, his voice full of emotion. "I loved you when you were Clara Whitmore, a widow with 3 sons. I loved you when you became my wife. I loved you through every pregnancy, every sleepless night, every challenge we have faced. And I will love you for the rest of my life." "And I love you," Clara replied, reaching up to touch his face. "You said you always wanted a big family, and you certainly got one. Are you sure you do not regret it when the house is loud and chaotic and there is never a moment's peace?" "Never," Cole said firmly. "That noise is the sound of life, of love, of everything I ever dreamed of. I would not change a single thing." They walked back to the ranch as the stars came out, talking about their plans for the future. Samuel was showing real promise with horses and wanted to start breeding them professionally. Daniel had expressed interest in becoming a teacher like Miss Abigail. William wanted to be just like Cole, a rancher and a cowboy. And the babies were still too young to know, but Cole and Clara would support them in whatever they chose. Life continued to unfold for the Harrison family in beautiful, ordinary ways. Samuel eventually took over most of the horse training operation, building a reputation across Wyoming for producing quality animals. On his 18th birthday, Cole formally offered him a partnership in the ranch, recognizing that the boy he had taken in as an 8-year-old was now a man who had earned his place. Samuel accepted with tears in his eyes, calling Cole the best father a man could ask for. Daniel did become a teacher, attending normal school and returning to Redemption to teach at the very school where he had once gotten into fights defending his family's honor. He married a sweet woman named Margaret, and they gave Cole and Clara their first grandchildren. William followed in Cole's footsteps completely, learning everything he could about ranching and eventually buying his own property adjacent to the family spread. He married a spirited woman named Ruth who could outride most men, and they built a life that mirrored Cole and Clara's in the best possible ways. Robert, Alina, and Grace grew up in a house full of love and laughter. They never knew the fear and uncertainty that their older brothers had experienced before Cole arrived. To them, Cole had always been their father, steady and strong and endlessly patient. They grew up hearing the story of how their parents met, how Cole had looked at a widow with 3 sons and seen not a burden but an opportunity. They grew up understanding that family was not just about blood but about choice and commitment. On their 20th anniversary, Cole and Clara stood on the porch of their ranch house, now expanded twice more to accommodate visiting children and grandchildren. Samuel and his wife were in town with their 3 kids. Daniel and Margaret had just arrived with their 2. William and Ruth were expected any moment with their 4 children, and Robert, Alina, and Grace, now teenagers, were inside helping prepare for the celebration. 20 years, Clara said, leaning against the porch railing and looking out over the land they had built together. "Can you believe it has been 20 years? Best 20 years of my life," Cole replied, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, just as he had done on their wedding night. His hair was graying at the temples now, and there were lines around his eyes, but he was still the same man who had told her he always wanted a big family. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had not met that day?" Clara asked. "If I had not walked out of that general store at that exact moment, I try not to," Cole admitted. "Because the thought of missing out on this, on you, on our children and grandchildren, it is too painful to imagine. I truly believe we were meant to find each other, Clara. You were meant to be rejected by those fools who could not see your worth. I was meant to be drifting through town at exactly the right time, and we were meant to build this life together." Clara turned in his arms to face him, seeing the love in his eyes that had only deepened over the years. "I was so scared that day. Scared to hope, scared to trust, scared to let myself fall in love again, but you made it impossible not to. You loved my boys when no one else would. You saw a family where others saw a burden." "I saw a gift," Cole corrected gently. "I saw exactly what I had been searching for my whole life, and I fought for it. I fought for you, for them, for us. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat." The sound of wagon wheels interrupted their moment, and they turned to see William and Ruth arriving with their boisterous children. Within minutes, the yard was full of noise and activity. Grandchildren running and playing, daughters-in-law helping in the kitchen, sons working with Cole to prepare the barbecue pit. It was chaos and confusion and absolutely perfect. As the sun set that evening, the entire family gathered around a long table that Cole and the boys had built specifically for these occasions. 23 people in total, ranging from baby Robert, who was 6 months old and named for his great-grandfather, to Clara and Cole themselves. They held hands as Cole said grace, thanking God for the food, for the land, for the health and happiness of their family, and for the day 20 years ago when a drifter cowboy had met a widow with 3 sons and known he had found his home. After dinner, as the children played and the adults sat around talking and laughing, Samuel stood up and cleared his throat. "I want to say something," he announced, and the table gradually quieted. 21 years ago, my father Robert Whitmore died, and I thought my world had ended. I was 8 years old, and I suddenly had to be the man of the house, taking care of my mother and my brothers. I was angry and scared and lost. And then one day, a cowboy came into our lives. He fixed our barn and mended our fences and taught me how to train horses. But more than that, he showed me what it means to be a man, not by blood or obligation, but by choice and love." Samuel's voice grew thick with emotion, but he continued. "Cole Harrison, you did not have to take us on. You could have ridden into town and right back out again. But you looked at a woman with 3 grieving boys and said the most important words I have ever heard. I always wanted a big family. You did not just marry our mother, you became our father in every way that matters. You taught us, guided us, loved us, and never once made us feel like we were anything other than your own sons. So on behalf of Daniel, William, and myself, I want to say thank you. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for staying. Thank you for being the father we needed and the man we aspire to be." By the time Samuel finished, there was not a dry eye at the table. Cole stood and embraced him, then Daniel, then William, his shoulders shaking with emotion. Clara watched through her own tears as the man she loved held the boys he had raised, and she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them all here. "I am the one who should be thanking you," Cole finally managed to say, his voice rough. "You boys gave me a purpose. You gave me a reason to stop drifting and start living. You made me a father, and that is the greatest honor of my life. I love you, all of you, more than words can say." The celebration continued late into the night, with music and dancing and the kind of joy that only comes from being surrounded by people who love you. As Clara and Cole finally climbed into bed in the early hours of the morning, both exhausted but happy, Clara snuggled close to her husband and sighed contentedly. "This is what happiness looks like," she murmured sleepily. "This is what it feels like to be loved and to love in return." "Thank you for finding me, Cole. Thank you for letting me stay," Cole replied, kissing her forehead. "I always wanted a big family, and you gave me that and so much more. You gave me a life worth living." As they drifted off to sleep, the house quiet at last except for the soft breathing of their youngest children in the next room, Clara reflected on the path that had brought her here. She had been rejected for being a widow with 3 sons. She had been told she was too much, too complicated, too burdensome. But Cole Harrison had looked at her and seen not a problem to solve but a family to love. He had seen opportunity where others saw obstacles. He had seen the woman she was, and the mother she was trying to be, and he had honored both. The years continued to pass in a beautiful blur. More grandchildren arrived, each one welcomed with the same enthusiasm and love that had characterized the Harrison family from the beginning. The ranch continued to prosper under the joint leadership of Cole, Samuel, and eventually William. Daniel's school became one of the best in the territory, and he was known for his kindness to students from difficult backgrounds, never forgetting his own struggles as a child. Robert Harrison grew into a fine young man with his father's steady nature and his mother's kind heart. He studied veterinary medicine and returned to Redemption to serve the ranching community, often working on the family horses that his brother Samuel bred. Eleanor became a midwife, helping bring new life into the world with skill and compassion. Grace shocked everyone by becoming one of the first female ranchers in the territory, running her own operation with an iron will and a good business sense that made Cole burst with pride. On their 30th anniversary, Cole and Clara took a rare trip away from the ranch, traveling to Denver for a long weekend. As they sat in a fancy restaurant that would have been unimaginable to them in those early days of struggling to make ends meet, Clara looked across the table at her husband and marveled at how their life had unfolded. "What are you thinking?" Cole asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I am thinking about Mrs. Henderson telling me that Thomas did not want to marry a widow with 3 sons, Clara replied with a smile. "I am thinking about how devastated I felt in that moment, how rejected and worthless. And I am thinking about how that rejection was actually the greatest gift because it kept me available for you to find." Cole reached across the table and took her hand. "Every rejection you faced led you to me. Every closed door opened the path to our life together. I am grateful for Thomas Henderson's stupidity, for every man who was too blind to see your worth, because it meant you were still there when I rode into town. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden in a day earlier or a day later?" Clara asked. "If we had missed each other entirely, no," Cole said firmly. "Because I believe we would have found each other eventually. Maybe not that day, but someday. Some things are just meant to be. You, me, our family, this life we have built, it was all meant to be." As they walked back to their hotel that evening, arm in arm through the gaslit streets of Denver, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. She had been through grief and struggle, rejection and hardship. But she had also experienced love beyond measure, joy beyond imagining, and a family that exceeded her wildest dreams. And it had all started with a cowboy who looked at her 3 sons and said the words that changed everything. "I always wanted a big family." The final years of their lives were peaceful and full. They watched their children thrive and their grandchildren grow. They celebrated births and mourned deaths, weathered droughts and harsh winters, but through it all, they had each other. Cole's hair turned completely white, but his eyes still sparkled with the same love when he looked at Clara. Clara's face showed the lines of a life well lived, but her smile was as bright as it had been the day she married him. On a warm summer evening in 1914, Clara and Cole sat on their porch watching the sunset, as they had done countless times over the past 32 years. They were in their 70s now, slowing down but still present for every family gathering, every important moment. Their children had thrown them a party the previous week for their anniversary, and the house had been filled with more than 40 people, all connected by blood or marriage to the family that had started when a cowboy took a chance on a widow with 3 sons. "You have any regrets?" Clara asked, breaking the comfortable silence. Cole considered the question seriously, as he always did. "Only that we did not have more time," he said finally. "I would live this life 100 times over if I could. Every joy, every challenge, every ordinary moment, I would choose it all again." "What about you?" "My only regret is that I waited so long to let myself hope again," Clara replied. "I wasted months being afraid when I could have been loving you, but I suppose even that worked out as it should. We found each other at exactly the right time." Cole squeezed her hand gently, their fingers intertwined just as their lives had been for more than 3 decades. "I love you, Clara Harrison. From that first day when I saw you standing in the street looking so strong and so vulnerable all at once, I loved you. And I will love you beyond this life and into whatever comes next." "And I love you," Clara whispered, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You were the answer to prayers I had not even known to pray. You were the family my sons needed and the partner I dreamed of. You were everything." They sat together as the sun painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple and pink. The same colors it had shown on their wedding day, on the day each of their children were born, on 1,000 ordinary evenings that had made up their extraordinary life. Around them, the ranch bustled with activity as several of their children and grandchildren went about their evening chores. The sound of laughter drifted from the barn where some of the younger grandchildren were playing. Smoke rose from the chimney of William's house in the distance. It was a symphony of family, of life lived to the fullest, of love multiplied and shared. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Cole and Clara rose and walked slowly into their house, into the life they had built together, surrounded by the evidence of their love in every corner. Photos lined the walls, capturing decades of birthdays and holidays and milestones. Hand-carved toys that Cole had made sat on shelves alongside dolls that Clara had sewn. The cradle that Samuel had built 30 years ago for baby Robert now sat in the corner, waiting for the next great-grandchild. They climbed into bed, as they had done thousands of nights before, fitting together in the way of couples who had shared a life. And as they drifted off to sleep, hands still joined, both felt the profound contentment that comes from knowing they had loved and been loved completely. Clara Harrison passed away peacefully in her sleep 3 years later, surrounded by her family. Cole held her hand until the very end, whispering words of love and gratitude for the life they had shared. He lived 2 more years, staying on the ranch with Samuel and his family, spending his days teaching great-grandchildren to ride and telling stories of the old days. He spoke often of Clara, keeping her memory alive with tales of her courage and strength, and the day he had fallen in love with a widow with 3 sons. When Cole passed away in 1919, the funeral was attended by more than 200 people, testament to the life he had lived and the family he had built. Samuel, Daniel, and William stood together, gray-haired men in their 60s now, united in their grief but also in their gratitude. They buried Cole next to Clara in the cemetery overlooking the ranch, under a shared headstone that read, "Cole and Clara Harrison, beloved parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. They built a family with love and created a legacy that will endure forever." At the gathering after the funeral, Samuel stood to speak one final time about the man who had been his father in every way that mattered. "When Cole Harrison rode into our lives, we were 3 broken boys and a struggling widow. He looked at us and said he always wanted a big family. And then he spent the next 37 years proving it every single day. He did not just give us his name, he gave us his time, his wisdom, his patience, and his unconditional love. Because of him, we became men who knew how to be husbands and fathers. Because of him, our children and our children's children will grow up understanding what real love looks like. Because of him, this family exists, and for that, we will be eternally grateful." The Harrison family continues to this day, spreading across Wyoming and beyond. A testament to one cowboy who saw opportunity where others saw burden, who saw love where others saw complication. The ranch still operates, passed down through generations, each one hearing the story of how it all began with a chance meeting, a kind offer, and the simple words that changed everything. I always wanted a big family. And in the end, that is exactly what Clara and Cole Harrison created, a family built not on obligation but on choice, not on blood alone but on love that transcended every barrier and every expectation. They proved that sometimes the greatest families are not born but made, crafted with patience and dedication, and the courage to take a chance on love even when the whole world says it is too complicated, too difficult, too much. They proved that with the right person, nothing is too much, and everything is possible. Their story became legend in Redemption, Wyoming, passed down through generations as proof that real love sees beyond circumstances to the heart of what matters most. Family, commitment, and the courage to choose love every single day.